This is HOA Neighbor Court, and the timeline is absurd. My name is Marcus. I am a high school assistant coach in Seattle, Washington, and I moved to the villas at Lakeview 3 years ago because the commute to the school was clean and the rent was reasonable. I work long hours during the season, my contract negotiations were heating up, and distractions could cost me real money. The HOA here had a reputation for being strict, but I figured I could follow the rules and stay out of trouble. I was wrong. The moment I pulled into my driveway after a late practice, Patricia Phillips, the rules interpretation chair who claims she wrote the covenants, was standing at my car door with a clipboard and a face like a clenched fist. "You are in violation of guest parking protocol," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Your vehicle does not display the current decal, and you have exceeded the 48-hour street parking window." I looked at my windshield. The decal was right there, updated 2 weeks ago. I pointed at it. "That is the current decal." I renewed it online and picked it up from the office. She leaned in, her key ring with too many keys jingling loudly as she moved. "I do not need your explanation. I need your payment. You owe a $100 compliance review fee, plus $50 for the violation notice I am filing right now." I felt my car key fob press hard into my palm. I did not owe anything. This is not a violation. I have the receipt in my email. She smiled, and it was not friendly. "I can make this a lean conversation in one email. Pay by Friday, or I will authorize a tow and boot for every vehicle registered to your address." I should have known right then that this was not about parking. This was about control. Patricia had a history of targeting certain homes in the neighborhood, and everyone knew it. The villas at Lakeview was the kind of community where certain homes got special treatment and everyone knew it, but proving it was another story. She turned and walked toward the curb, pulling out a small orange reflective marker and placing it at the edge of the street like a warning flag. She snapped a photo with her phone, then looked back at me. "Consider this your courtesy notice," she said. Next time I skipped the courtesy. I watched her walk away, her pink blazer catching the last of the afternoon light. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the HOA portal with a PDF attachment. Violation notice, dated that day, listing 3 separate infractions I had never committed. The heat was rising, and I could feel sweat forming under my hoodie. I had 2 days to respond, and the portal was already showing a $50 late fee that should not exist. I took a photo of my decal, my car, and the orange marker she left behind. I did not know it yet, but that marker was going to show up again and again, and it was going to matter. I went inside and pulled up the HOA documents. The guest parking rules were a mess, full of contradictions and vague language, but one thing was clear. Enforcement required written notice and a 3-day response window before any tow authorization. Patricia had given me 2 days and was already threatening a boot. I called the management company. The woman on the phone sounded tired. She said Patricia handled all parking enforcement directly, and the management company only processed the fees after the fact. I asked if there was an appeal process. She said I could file a written appeal, but it would take 10 business days to review, and fees were still due during the review period. That night, I got another email. This one had a photo attachment. It was my car, taken from a different angle, with a timestamp from earlier that afternoon. The email said I had been observed violating the fire lane during pickup hours, and that a second violation notice was being filed. I looked at the photo. My car was in my own driveway, nowhere near a fire lane. I called Patricia. She did not pick up. I left a message asking her to call me back so we could clear this up. She never did. The next morning, I drove to the HOA office. It was a small building near the front gate, painted beige, with a faded sign that said VS at Lakeview Parking Compliance Association. Inside, a young guy named Travis was working the desk. He looked uncomfortable the moment I mentioned Patricia's name. He said she was not in, but he could take a message. I asked him about the fire lane violation. He pulled it up on his screen and frowned. "That does not look right," he said quietly. "Your address is not even near the fire lane zone." "I know. Can you cancel the notice?" He shook his head. Only Patricia can do that. She has full authority over parking enforcement. I asked him if there was a record of complaints that led to the violation. He hesitated, then turned the screen toward me. The complaint log was empty. No one had reported my car. Patricia had filed the notice herself, with no external complaint. I took a photo of the screen with my phone. Travis looked nervous. "You did not see that," he said. I nodded. But I had it. That was evidence. I left the office and called my attorney friend Mike, who had helped me with my contract negotiations. He listened to the whole story, then sighed. "This smells like retaliation," he said. "Do you have any idea why she is targeting you?" I thought about it. A few months ago, I had voted against a special assessment that Patricia pushed hard for. It was supposed to fund a new gate system, but the cost was inflated, and the vendor was a friend of hers. The vote failed, and she was furious. I told Mike about it. "That is probably your answer," he said. "She is using parking enforcement to punish you. Document everything. Keep a log. Save every email, every photo, every notice. If this escalates, you will need it." It escalated. That afternoon, I got a call from a tow company. The driver said he was on his way to my address to remove 2 vehicles under HOA authorization. I told him I had no violations and no notices. He said he had a work order from Patricia Phillips, and it listed my car and my girlfriend's car as unauthorized and overdue for removal. I ran outside. A tow truck was backing into my driveway, the amber lights flashing, the wheel lift already lowering. The driver stepped out, a big guy in a stained shirt, holding a clipboard. "You Marcus?" he asked. "I am." "What is this about?" He handed me a paper. It was a tow authorization form, signed by Patricia, listing both vehicles as abandoned and non-compliant. I felt my chest tighten. "These cars are not abandoned," I said. "I live here. I have current decals. This is fraud." He shrugged. "I just do what the work order says. You got a problem, call the HOA. I pulled out my phone and called Patricia. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice bright and fake. "Marcus, what can I do for you? You authorized a tow on my cars. They are legal. They have decals. This is harassment." She laughed. "You failed to respond to 2 violation notices, and you have unpaid fines. The covenants allow immediate tow for non-compliance. I do not need your explanation. I need your payment. I am not paying fraudulent fines. Cancel the tow." She paused. Then her voice dropped, cold and flat. "I can make this a lean conversation in 1 email. You have 10 minutes to pay, or the trucks leave with your cars." I hung up and turned to the driver. "I am not letting you tow these cars. If you try, I am calling the police." He looked at his clipboard, then at me, then back at the truck. He pulled out his phone and called someone. I could hear him explaining the situation, then listening. After a minute, he hung up and climbed back into the truck. "My boss says if there is a dispute, we do not touch it," he said. "You need to work this out with the HOA." He pulled out of the driveway and left. I was shaking. I called Mike again and told him what happened. He said I needed to file a formal complaint with the management company and the state HOA regulatory board, and I needed to do it immediately. He also said I should expect Patricia to escalate further, because people like her do not back down when challenged. He was right. That night, I got an email from the management company. It said my access to the community pool, gym, and clubhouse had been suspended pending resolution of outstanding violations. It was signed by Patricia with a copy to the property management director. The email included a line that made my blood run cold. Failure to comply may result in additional enforcement actions, including coordination with approved vendors for compliance services. That was the amenities lockout threat delivered like a power trip, and it told me everything I needed to know. Patricia was not just enforcing rules. She was using the management company and the tow vendor together to create a coordinated harassment push, and she was doing it with the HOA's authority behind her. I needed proof that this was retaliation, not enforcement. I needed something bigger than photos and complaint logs. I needed to catch her in the act. I spent the next 2 days building a timeline. Every notice, every email, every photo, every call. I mapped it all out in a spreadsheet. The pattern was obvious. Every action Patricia took happened within hours of me challenging her or voting against her. She was not enforcing rules. She was punishing me. But I needed something undeniable, something that would force the board and the management company to act. I remembered what Travis had said. Patricia handled enforcement directly. That meant she had access to systems and communications that could show intent. I needed to get into the HOA group chat. The HOA used a private messaging app for board members and committee chairs. I was not on it, but my neighbor Dan was. Dan was a contractor who had photos and timestamps from the day Patricia interfered with his work truck, and he had been quietly collecting evidence of her targeting other homeowners. I called him. Dan, I need your help. I think Patricia is coordinating with the tow company to target specific homes. Do you have access to the board chat? He was quiet for a moment. Yeah. I see messages all the time. Why? I need screenshots. Anything where she talks about enforcement, towing, or specific homeowners. Can you do that? Another pause. If she finds out I gave you this, she will come after me too. She is already coming after both of us, I said. We need to stop her before she does this to someone else. He agreed. That night, he sent me a zip file with 30 screenshots. I opened them and felt my stomach drop. Patricia had been coordinating with the tow vendor for months, telling them which cars to prioritize, which homes to watch, and which violations to ignore. One message said, Marcus voted no on the gate assessment. Make sure his vehicles get flagged for any excuse. Another said, if anyone challenges the fee, tell them it is an administrative hold and they have to pay to appeal. There were messages about other homeowners too, all people who had opposed Patricia on votes or complained about her behavior. It was a retaliation campaign, documented in her own words. I gave her a small thank you, because she just handed me leverage. I saved every screenshot to 3 different cloud accounts and printed hard copies. This was my trump card, and I was not going to reveal it until the right moment. But the right moment was not here yet. Patricia was still escalating, and I needed to let her dig herself deeper before I pulled the trigger. The next morning, I got another notice. This one said my parking decal had been revoked due to unpaid fines, and any vehicle without a valid decal would be towed on site starting Monday. It was Friday. I had 3 days, and the portal Wi-Fi was down, so I could not even log in to dispute the fees or upload proof of payment. This was the side complication that made everything harder. My proof was in my email, and the HOA portal Wi-Fi was down right when I needed it. I drove to a coffee shop and used their internet to file a formal appeal with the management company, attaching every photo, every email, and a written statement explaining the retaliation pattern. I did not include the screenshots yet. I was saving those. Monday morning, I woke up to the sound of a diesel engine. I looked out the window and saw a tow truck in front of my house. The driver stepping out with a handheld device. He scanned my license plate, then walked to my door and knocked. I opened it. He handed me a slip of paper. Your decal is flagged as invalid, he said. I am authorized to tow unless you can show proof of compliance. I showed him my phone with the decal receipt and the appeal confirmation. He looked at it, then shook his head. I need a physical decal or a release from the HOA. I do not have either of those, so I have to proceed. I called Patricia. She did not answer. I called the management company. They said Patricia was out of the office and they could not override her enforcement actions without board approval. I asked when the board met next. They said Thursday. It was Monday. I had 3 days to stop this, and my car was about to leave on a truck. I called Mike. He said if the tow was unauthorized, I could file a police report for theft, but I would have to prove the decal was valid and the tow was not authorized under the HOA covenants. He also said I should go to the tow yard and demand to see the authorization paperwork and the fee breakdown, because tow companies hate scrutiny and they often back down when challenged. I told the driver I was coming with him to the yard. He shrugged and hooked up my car. I followed in my girlfriend's car, and when we got to the yard, I went straight to the office window. The woman behind the glass looked bored. "I need to see the authorization for the tow you just completed," I said. She slid a carbon copy form through the slot. It was signed by Patricia, dated that morning, and it listed my vehicle as abandoned and non-compliant. I took a photo of it. "This is fraud," I said. "The vehicle is not abandoned. It is registered, insured, and has a valid decal. Who authorized this company to enforce HOA rules?" She looked annoyed. "We have a contract with the HOA. Take it up with them. I need the fee breakdown." She slid another sheet through. Tow fee, impound fee, administrative fee, gate fee, storage fee, and a compliance review fee. Total, $640. I felt my jaw tighten. "I am not paying this. This is an illegal tow." "Then your car stays here," she said. I walked outside and called the police non-emergency line. I explained the situation, and they said they would send an officer to take a report. While I waited, I called Dan and told him what was happening. He said he would meet me at the yard with his documentation. 20 minutes later, a city patrol car pulled up, and a young officer stepped out. I explained the whole thing: the retaliation, the fraudulent notices, the coordinated enforcement. He listened, took notes, and asked to see the authorization form. I showed him the photo. "This looks like a civil dispute," he said. "The HOA has the authority to authorize tows under the covenants. If you think the tow was improper, you need to take it up with the HOA board or file a lawsuit." "What about the fraudulent notices?" I asked. "Unless you can prove criminal intent, it is still a civil matter." He left. I felt defeated, but I was not done. Dan arrived a few minutes later with a folder full of photos and a printed timeline. We sat in his truck and went over everything. He had documented Patricia doing the same thing to 3 other homeowners, all of them people who had opposed her on board votes. One of them had been towed twice in the same month, both times with no valid violation. Dan also had a photo of Patricia placing an orange reflective marker at another neighbor's curb, just like the one she had put at mine. "She uses the same marker every time," Dan said. "I think she keeps it in her car." That marker was showing up everywhere, and it was starting to feel like a signature. I needed to find out where it came from and whether it had any official weight, because if it did not, then every tow she authorized using it as evidence was invalid. I called Travis at the HOA office again. "Travis, the orange markers Patricia uses for parking violations, are those official?" He hesitated. "No. She bought them herself. They are not part of the enforcement protocol. So she is marking cars with personal property and using that as justification for tows?" Silence. Then, "Yeah, I guess so." That was it. That was the crack. If the markers were not official, then the notices were not valid, and the tows were not authorized. I thanked Travis and hung up. I now had 3 pieces of evidence: the empty complaint log, the board chat screenshots, and the unofficial marker. I needed one more thing to lock it down: proof that Patricia was not even current on her own dues while lecturing everyone else. I called the management company and requested a copy of my account statement, along with a list of all homeowners with past due balances. They said they could not provide names, but they could confirm whether a specific address was delinquent. I gave them Patricia's address. They put me on hold, then came back. That account is 90 days past due, the woman said. I smiled. Perfect. I now had everything I needed, but I was not going to reveal it yet. Patricia was going to escalate one more time, and when she did, I was going to be ready. If you want to see how I use this evidence to take down an entire HOA enforcement racket, hit the like button and subscribe, because this story is about to get wild. Thursday came, and the board meeting was scheduled for 7 in the evening. I had already emailed the screenshots to every homeowner in the community, time to arrive at 6:30, so Patricia would walk into the meeting with everyone already knowing what she had done. I did not tell her I was coming. I just showed up, walked into the clubhouse, and sat in the front row. Patricia was at the board table, wearing her pink blazer and white bucket hat, her key ring jingling as she shuffled papers. She saw me and her face went tight. The meeting started with routine business: budget review, landscaping bids, pool maintenance. Then the board president, a tired-looking man named Greg, cleared his throat. We have received several complaints about parking enforcement, he said. I think we need to address this. Patricia leaned forward. The enforcement actions were all justified under the covenants. If residents do not like the rules, they can petition for a change, but I will not apologize for doing my job. Greg looked uncomfortable. There are questions about whether the process was followed correctly. I raised my hand. I would like to speak. Patricia glared at me. This is not a public comment period. Greg waved her off. Let him speak. I stood up and pulled out my phone. I have evidence that enforcement actions over the past 6 months were not rule-based. They were retaliation. I have complaint logs showing no external complaints. I have board chat messages showing coordination with the tow vendor to target specific homeowners. I have photos showing the use of unauthorized markers to justify notices. And I have confirmation that the rules interpretation chair is 90 days past due on her own HOA dues, while threatening liens against others. The room went silent. Patricia stood up, her chair scraping loudly. That is slander, she said, her voice shaking. You have no right to make accusations without proof. I do not need your explanation, I said. I need your resignation. And if you do not provide it, I will be filing a formal complaint with the State Regulatory Board, along with a lawsuit for harassment, illegal towing, and breach of fiduciary duty. Greg looked at Patricia. Is any of this true? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her face was red, her hands trembling. She grabbed her papers and walked out. The door slammed behind her, and the room erupted in murmurs. Greg called for a recess, and during the break, 3 other board members came up to me and thanked me for speaking up. They said they had suspected Patricia was overstepping, but they had not had proof. Now they did. When the meeting resumed, Greg announced that Patricia had submitted her resignation effective immediately, and that the board would be conducting a full audit of all parking enforcement actions from the past year. He also said that any homeowner who had been towed or fined under questionable circumstances could file for a refund, and the board would review each case individually. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but I was not done yet. I still needed my car back, and I still needed to make sure the tow vendor faced consequences. The next morning, I went back to the tow yard. This time I brought Dan, Mike, and a printed copy of Greg's statement from the meeting. The woman at the window saw me coming and sighed. I need my car released, I said. The HOA has acknowledged that the enforcement actions were improper, and I am not paying the fees. She looked at the statement, then picked up a phone and called someone. After a long conversation, she hung up and slid a release form through the slot. The owner says we are dropping the fees, she said. Your car is released. I signed the form and walked out to the lot. My car was still there, covered in dust, but intact. I drove it out of the yard and felt a rush of relief. But I was not satisfied yet. I wanted the tow company to lose their contract with the HOA, and I wanted every homeowner who had been targeted to get their money back. Over the next 2 weeks, Dan and I worked with the board to compile a full list of enforcement actions under Patricia's tenure. We found 23 questionable tows, 38 bogus fines, and 12 cases where homeowners had been threatened with liens or amenity lockouts. The board voted to issue refunds for all of them, totaling over $18,000. They also voted to terminate the contract with the tow vendor and implement a new enforcement protocol that required third-party verification before any tow could be authorized. The final piece came 3 weeks later. I got a call from the state HOA regulatory board. They had completed their investigation and found that Patricia had violated multiple statutes related to fiduciary duty, abuse of authority, and retaliation. They issued a formal reprimand and barred her from serving on any HOA board in the state for 5 years. They also recommended that the HOA adopt new bylaws to prevent future abuse, including term limits for enforcement chairs and mandatory training for board members. I was at the school gym when I got the news, running drills with the team. My contract negotiations had wrapped up the week before, and I had gotten everything I wanted. The distractions had not cost me. If anything, the whole mess had made me sharper, more focused, more willing to fight for what was right. I thought about Patricia, sitting somewhere with her key ring and her clipboard, knowing that her power was gone. I thought about the orange marker she had used to mark so many cars, now sitting in a box somewhere. Meaningless. That night, I got one last email. It was from Greg, the board president. He thanked me for bringing the evidence forward and said the community was better off because of it. He also said the board had voted to create a new homeowner advocacy position, and they wanted to know if I would be interested. I thought about it for a minute, then replied. I told him I appreciated the offer, but I was done with HOA politics. I just wanted to live in peace and coach my team. He understood. A month later, I was at the community pool with my girlfriend when I saw Patricia across the parking lot. She was getting into her car, and she looked smaller somehow, less certain. She glanced my way, and I nodded. She did not nod back. She just got in her car and drove away. I never saw her again. The settlement that included refunds and limits on enforcement changed everything. Homeowners who had been afraid to speak up started attending meetings. The new board passed a rule requiring actual complaints before any enforcement action could be taken, and they hired an independent management company to handle all parking issues. The predatory cycle was broken, and it stayed broken. I kept the orange marker. I do not know why. Maybe as a reminder that power without accountability always collapses eventually. Or maybe just because it felt good to have proof that I had won. Dan still sends me screenshots from the board chat sometimes, just to show me how calm things are now. No threats. No retaliation. Just normal neighborhood business. One afternoon, I was walking to my car when I saw a new family moving in across the street. The mom was unloading boxes, and she looked stressed. I walked over and introduced myself. I told her the HOA had been through some changes, but things were better now. She smiled and said she had heard stories about the old board, and she was glad she missed it. I told her if she ever had trouble, she should document everything and reach out. She thanked me and went back to her boxes. As I walked back to my car, I thought about the moment Patricia had stood in my driveway with her clipboard and her fake authority, telling me I owed money I did not owe. I thought about the tow truck backing in, the boot clamp key she had held up like proof, the portable thermal printer she had waved around as if it settled everything. I thought about the board chat messages, the empty complaint logs, the unofficial markers. All of it had seemed so overwhelming in the moment, like I was fighting a system that could not be stopped. But systems run on people, and people make mistakes. Patricia made hers when she put everything in writing. She made it again when she targeted too many people and gave us all a reason to compare notes. And she made it one last time when she held up that boot clamp key in front of the tow yard office, so sure of herself, so convinced that she was untouchable. The HOA attorney corrected her in plain language at the final board meeting, the one where the vote came down. He said enforcement actions without documentation were invalid. He said coordination with vendors for retaliation purposes was a breach of fiduciary duty. He said threatening liens without following the proper notice protocols was illegal, and he said the board had a responsibility to make sure it never happened again. The board voted to require actual evidence before fines, and they voted to remove Patricia from all positions of authority. I watched it happen, and I felt something I had not felt in months. Relief. Not because I had won, but because the nightmare was over. I could park my car without checking for markers. I could go to work without worrying about another notice in my mailbox. I could live in my home without feeling like I was under surveillance. The orange marker is still on my desk, next to the boot clamp key Dan gave me as a joke after the settlement went through. He said I should frame them. I said maybe someday. For now, they are just reminders that documentation wins, that retaliation leaves a trail, and that people who abuse power always get caught eventually. A few weeks ago, I was at a school board meeting for work, and I saw a woman in a pink blazer sitting in the back row. For a second, my chest tightened, but it was not Patricia, just someone who dressed like her. I realized I was not scared anymore. I was free. That is the thing about fighting an HOA. It is not about winning a single battle. It is about breaking the cycle so the next person does not have to fight at all. The villas at Lakeview is a different place now. The new board is fair. The enforcement is transparent. And the tow trucks only show up when there is an actual problem, not when someone wants to settle a score. I still see Dan around the neighborhood. He is working on a new project, helping other homeowners in nearby communities document their own HOA issues. He says the screenshots I shared with him opened his eyes to how common this kind of abuse is, and he wants to make sure people know they do not have to take it. I told him I would help however I could. Last week, I got an email from a guy in another HOA across town. He said he had heard about what happened at the Villas, and he was dealing with something similar. His board was threatening to tow his work truck, and he did not know what to do. I sent him a copy of my timeline template, a list of things to document, and Mike's contact information. I told him to keep everything in writing and to never pay a fee without proof of the violation. He thanked me and said he felt less alone. That is the real win. Not the refunds, not the board votes, not even the satisfaction of watching Patricia walk out of that meeting. The real win is knowing that the next person has a roadmap. They do not have to figure it out from scratch. They do not have to feel powerless. They can fight back, and they can win. I think about that every time I see the orange marker on my desk. It is not a trophy. It is a reminder. A reminder that power without accountability is just bullying with a gavel, and bullies always lose when you call their bluff. The settlement that included refunds and limits on enforcement was not just about money. It was about changing the rules so the game could not be rigged anymore. The board implemented a new policy. Any enforcement action had to be supported by a third-party complaint or photographic evidence reviewed by the management company. No more personal vendettas. No more coordination with two vendors. No more markers placed in the dark. And the funniest part, the part that still makes me smile, happened during the final audit. The board asked Patricia to turn over all her enforcement files so they could verify the violations. She showed up to the office with a banker's box full of papers, dropped it on the counter and said, "Nobody complains." We run a tight ship. Travis, the guy at the desk, opened the box. Inside was a stack of complaints, 3 inches thick, all filed by homeowners over the past 2 years, all ignored or dismissed by Patricia without investigation. The board president looked at the pile, then looked at Patricia, and said, "You were saying?" That moment, where Karen says nobody complains and a stack of complaints appears, was the beginning of the end for her. The board voted that night to refund every fee Patricia had collected without proper documentation. The refunds went out within 2 weeks. My check was for $800. Dan got $1,200. Other homeowners got even more. The total payout was over $18,000, and every dollar came out of the reserve fund Patricia had insisted was untouchable. The irony was not lost on anyone. The tow vendor lost their contract immediately. The board sent a formal letter terminating the relationship and citing the coordination with Patricia as the reason. The vendor tried to fight it, but once the board made the chat screenshots public, They dropped the dispute and moved on. I heard later that they lost contracts with 3 other HOAs in the area after word got around. Patricia tried to appeal the board's decision to remove her. She hired an attorney and filed a complaint with the state, claiming she had been defamed and that the board had acted without proper notice. The state investigator reviewed the case, looked at the evidence, and dismissed her complaint within a week. The investigator's report said the board had acted appropriately, and that Patricia's actions constituted a clear abuse of authority. The report was made public, and it included a recommendation that the HOA adopt term limits and mandatory ethics training for all board members. The board passed both measures unanimously. The new enforcement chair is a retired police officer named Linda. She is fair, transparent, and does not tolerate nonsense from anyone. She told me once that the job is boring now, which is exactly how it should be. No drama, no retaliation, just rules applied evenly to everyone. I told her boring is good. She agreed. I still see the orange markers sometimes, placed by the city on cars that are actually parked illegally. But they are official now, and they come with proper notices, and they only lead to tows when the violations are real. The markers do not scare me anymore. They are just markers. My contract got renewed at the school, with a raise. The team made it to the playoffs. My girlfriend and I are talking about buying a house. Maybe outside an HOA this time. Maybe somewhere with fewer rules and more space. But if we do stay in an HOA, I know what to look for now. I know what red flags mean. And I know how to fight back if it ever happens again. Sometimes I walk through the neighborhood and see families outside, kids playing, people washing their cars without fear of a notice. It feels normal now. It feels like a community. That is what it was supposed to be all along. I got a message last month from Travis, the guy who used to work the HOA desk. He quit the job and went back to school. He said working under Patricia had been miserable, and he was glad it was over. He thanked me for standing up, and he said he learned a lot from watching the whole thing unfold. I told him he helped more than he knew. Dan and I still grab beers sometimes. We talk about the case like it is ancient history, but it has only been a few months. He says he is working with 2 other homeowners in different communities, helping them build cases against their boards. He is good at it. He has the patience and the eye for detail that it takes. I told him he should start a consulting business. He laughed and said maybe someday. I keep the screenshots backed up in 3 places. I do not think I will ever need them again, but I am not taking chances. I also keep the timeline, the photos, the complaint logs, the emails, all of it. Not because I am paranoid, but because I know how quickly people forget. I know how easy it is for the cycle to start over if no one remembers how bad it was. The last time I saw Patricia was at a grocery store, about a month after the board vote. She was in the checkout line ahead of me, and she did not see me at first. When she did, she froze. Her face went pale, and she grabbed her bags and left without a word. I felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. Just relief that it was over. I paid for my groceries and walked out into the parking lot. The sun was setting, and the air was cool. I got in my car, the one that had been towed and booted and threatened with liens, and I drove home. No markers on the curb. No notices on the windshield. No tow trucks in the driveway. Just a quiet evening in a neighborhood that finally felt like home. The HOA voted to require actual evidence before fines, and they voted to bring in an independent auditor every year to review enforcement actions. They also voted to create a homeowner bill of rights that spelled out the appeal process, the notice requirements, and the limits on enforcement authority. It was printed and mailed to every home in the community. I still have mine on the fridge. The changes were not just procedural, they were cultural. People started showing up to meetings. They started asking questions. They started holding the board accountable. And the board, for the first time in years, started listening. That is the legacy of the fight. Not the refunds, not the resignations, not even the satisfaction of watching Patricia lose. The legacy is a community that knows its rights and is willing to defend them. A community that does not tolerate abuse, even when it comes with a clipboard and a blazer. I sleep better now. I do not check my email every hour. I do not flinch when I see a tow truck. I do not feel like I am under attack just for living in my own home. That is what winning looks like. Not a trophy, not a headline, just peace. And if someone ever tries to pull the same thing again, I will be ready. I have the receipts. I have the timeline. I have the screenshots. And I have the orange marker sitting on my desk, reminding me every day that documentation beats intimidation every single time. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.